Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our continuing CentreCourt MBA Festival for today. We have three really terrific schools and three incredible people to represent them. Faces that I know for a long time, and hopefully maybe some of you know as well. From Michigan Ross, we have Diana Economy, who's Director of Full-Time MBA Admissions. From Florida, we have Naz Arangak, who's been here many times, Director of Admissions. And from Berkeley Haas, we have Eric Askins, the Executive Director of Full-Time MBA Admissions. Welcome, everybody. So I want to get a sense for how this past admissions cycle has gone, both in terms of what you're seeing. Many people thought it would be among the most competitive admission seasons ever, in part because of the pandemic and probably some pent-up demand. Although many schools extended their deadlines in the previous year and had most of the benefit of the pandemic effect, I think. So Dan, I want to start with you because earlier this month, Ross announced that it would extend its test waiver policy. And I wonder from your perspective how that went in the past admission season. I'm assuming it went extremely well since you're extending it, and what impact it will have on the entering class in the fall. I know there's still, there's so-called summer melt, and there are still a few things that are in the air, obviously. Some schools still have additional deadlines for the full cohort. But what does it look at Michigan Ross?
Yeah, it's a good question, John. And I think, we did decide to extend or well, to offer the waiver for the first time this year because we were hearing from candidates about the challenges that they were having with being able to take the test online. And those were things like inconsistent Wi-Fi connection or maybe not having a home environment that was suitable to be able to perform their best on those tests. We also recognize through many years of taking a look at candidate profiles that some of these candidates really had other attributes, whether it was their undergraduate experience, their professional work experience, things that would make up for the fact that they didn't have that test score and would still give us the confidence we were looking for to make sure that they were likely to be successful in the classroom. So we extended the waiver in November. What we did was with our round one candidates, we went out and told our round one candidates that we're only going to either admit you or waitlist you because the round one candidates didn't have the benefit of applying for the waiver before it was offered. And if waitlisted, they had the chance to say, I'd like my candidacy to be further reviewed with the waiver in place. Okay, so the way that our waiver works is you apply for the waiver typically, right? So you put in for the waiver to say, I'd like to request a waiver. Here's the rationale. Here's the supporting documentation, whether my transcript, my resume, the various elements, and even an assessment of just personal situation. It really is a humanistic and holistic review. There's different reasons for different people submitting the waiver requests. We received a healthy number of waiver requests. I'm still waiting to get kind of the final numbers. We just closed out for our final round, which is June 1st. But what I will tell you is at this point, we're trending towards having probably about 10 to 15% of the class this fall having a waiver, in place. We did a lot of due diligence with the consulting firms and others to see what impact there might be on the employment side. And John, I know you recently put out an article that spoke to Bain and McKinsey and Goldman. And really what we're hearing from the employers was they are also taking a holistic review of candidates and they are able to evaluate candidates without that. And so that was something we took into account, knowing that that would be an important element for candidates. In extending the waiver, really where we're at right now is the same place we were 6 months ago, right? So for the same rationale, and recognizing that the next 6 months would be when people would largely take tests for the next admission cycle, not a whole lot is likely to have changed. And so we decided it was the right move to extend the waiver.
Right. And what kind of volume did you see? Was it basically the same as last year, or what was your sense of that?
Yeah, the application volume is up quite a bit. And I think there's a whole host of factors. I know application volumes really across the board, waiver or otherwise, were pretty high this year. We certainly saw that with candidates who applied for the waiver. One of the things we found is, we had people who have great credentials. John, you mentioned that one of the things we put out there is we were seeing great candidates. You're talking about people who went to top tier universities with top GPAs who might be running a charter school during a pandemic, right? Or taking care of family members who were sick, or a whole host of things. And so the profiles that we saw were quite strong and on par with the high caliber candidates we would expect to see. And what we'll do in this coming year is, of course, we'll monitor, how the performance of those who come in without a test score. But given the other elements of their applications, we feel good about their ability to be successful in the program.
Terrific. Eric, what's the picture look like at Berkeley this past year?
Thanks for the question, John. In terms of what we're seeing, we've had an increase in applications, which we were expecting to see, just based on some of the early indicators. To the point that you mentioned earlier, there was some pent-up demand that we certainly noticed through the pandemic, but I think there's also this sense that this is the best time to think about reinvesting in oneself.
Yeah.
This was the read that we had gotten from so many of the candidates who applied, that they had perhaps plateaued in a career, and the pandemic had exacerbated that plateau. There didn't seem to be a next step, or they were thinking about making a shift, and this became the best opportunity for them to do that. And so that translated for us into about a 12% increase in application volume across the board. We've been excited with that increase. It's created some additional competition, something that I think has been mentioned certainly on Poets and Quants and a couple other places as well. But I think where there are strong candidates, there's going to continue to be opportunity, and we certainly saw that play through throughout our cycle.
Will that be a record number of applications for your program or not?
No, it will not. No, I think 4 or 5 years ago we hit a particular high, and so that I don't think we're going up to that level of height, but it is certainly an increase over the last 3 years. So trending back up, which has been nice for us. It gives us certainly a broad array of candidates to choose from, and we've had a great opportunity to bring in a fairly diverse class. Again, to your point earlier about summer melt, that is going to continue to be the case, and we're well aware. We've just closed our third round of offers, which is sort of the end of our journey for candidates coming through for this cycle. And we're looking very similar in terms of our academic indicators and the general diversity of the class. The excitement here is the increase in international diversity for us. So last year,
exactly.
we took a hit, but let's be honest, what we did is we were as open as we could be to folks who needed to defer or needed to come up with another opportunity to come through, because obviously there were challenges for folks across the globe. Now, I think it's safe to say that the recovery has been uneven around the globe, and some challenges continue to linger. But we've positioned ourselves well to increase the number of international students in the class, which we're excited to do. We're bringing ourselves back to the level that we typically are, which is between 35 and 40%, and we'll see where that all settles in after the summer.
And in common with other schools, the last entering class, you had what percentage of international students?
21%.
Yeah,
right.
And that
which
is down at every school because of the travel restrictions, visa problems, all kinds of things.
Yeah, a whole host of issues were certainly involved. And in fact, the other part of that math, of course, is we had an enrollment target. So although we had fewer international students, we had to make up with additional domestic students, and that further reduced that by percentage. However, we were excited to see that we had nearly 30 countries represented this last year as well. And so there were certainly components of a global and diverse program on campus, just fewer by head count and fewer by percentage.
Right. And now, so how about at your school? What did you find this last admission season? And it's still continuing. Of course, people can still apply to Florida.
Yep, no, absolutely. And thanks again, John, for having me here today. So at the University of Florida, Warrington College of Business, when I compare the numbers from this year to last year, we're tracking pretty similarly to where we were last year. And I think, unlike maybe what Diana had indicated at Ross, unfortunately, we weren't able to offer any kind of test waivers. But the flip side to that is, although we know that test takers as a whole are down, and more schools are offering these test waivers, we are still robust with our full tuition scholarship awarding. And so all those students that are coming in, we're deliberately bringing in a small group of students. They will be fully funded. And so to give you some perspective, last year we brought in 52 full-time MBAs. We're on target with that number again this year. And we have a unique set of full-time offerings because we do offer our one-year accelerated program. So in fact, we had one group start with us just 2 weeks ago. We have another group starting, here in mid-June, and then our kind of traditional 2-year cohort starting here with us this August. And that August application round 3 deadline just passed. It was just this past weekend. But of course, if you are a highly qualified candidate, I encourage you, even in the 11th hour, to reach out because, similar to what Eric and Diana do, here at UF, we believe in a holistic review. Although we aren't able to get around the testing requirement, that's something that we do really pride ourselves on looking and making sure that there's that culture fit. And I know if anybody watched yesterday, there was a fantastic, panel on career placement with these, with our schools. And so I think that also leads into, the total environment of who's hiring our students and what does the actual, environment look like of applicants. But by and large, we're super excited to be on track with where we were last year in terms of diversity. We have just pulled these numbers, about 44% diverse population represented in our cohorts. I just pulled the incoming 2021 group has about 40% female to male ratio. So, we're on target for what we're, hoping for.
I want to go back to what Eric said, Naz, about the international part of the pool. It's well known that there were significant declines in international applicants throughout the Trump administration, partly due to anti-immigration rhetoric. Some people thought they were less welcome in the United States at U.S. business schools. And then there was increased concern over whether or not you can get an H-1B visa. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, it only exacerbated all this because it made travel much more difficult. Have you seen, as well as Berkeley, an increase in the international candidates in your pool this past year?
It's interesting that you asked that. So I think if I looked at it timeline wise, I think up until when there was more light about vaccinations, I still saw kind of this lull, if you will, of international applicants. And then as kind of everything is constantly changing with the pandemic, and as there's some light at the end of the tunnel, I'm seeing more candidates that rather than looking to apply in 2022, they're reaching out saying, hey, can I apply to start as early as this fall? And of course, we will try our best to process them, but recognizing that there is just a lengthy time lag if when one is trying to get a student visa. But so, to answer your question, I didn't see as quite of a increase in international applicants as these other 2 schools. However, I am seeing anecdotally more and more interest. And so I'm hopeful for 2022 that our numbers will reflect that as such.
Great. Diana, what about the international contingent at Ross? Did you see an increase in both applicants and ultimately in what you expect to enroll?
Yeah, we definitely saw increases across the board. And I was just taking a look at what the balance is. It was close to 50-50 domestic internationals, a little higher domestic, maybe 51-52% domestic, and then about 48% international. One of the things that's been nice about this forum, whether it is this event or anything that we've been doing over Zoom, is the level of inclusion that we've been able to have at these events. So we've done so many different events. Some of these events would have upwards of 95 different countries represented in terms of the registration list. 75 of which we probably never would have traveled to, right? We just wouldn't have had the capacity to be able to visit all of those different countries. And so I think to be able to connect and engage with candidates through these various formats has been really beneficial to us. I think it's something that candidates will obviously see going forward, not only for health reasons, right, and for keeping engaged, but because it was a successful medium for us to be able to connect with such a diversity of candidates. So I do, look to that as a reason that we were able to expand our reach into countries that we might have had less access to or less outreach to. And then I think, candidates in countries that we might have had more representation in had greater access to alumni from those countries, or students, or other means where they were able to just have better connectivity to learn more about the school. So I think those have been wins through the last year, and that will continue into the next cycle.
Obviously, the largest source of international students for U.S. business schools for many years has been India. And we all know right now that the coronavirus has had a tremendous tragic impact on India. And I wonder, just in thinking about the fall cohort and those who've been admitted from that country, what you're thinking of in terms of any kind of special accommodations for people who may have difficulty getting here at the start of the program. Are we going to see hybrid formats likely, so that while most people will be in person because of the better vaccination issue in the United States, will people who can't get here on time be able to at least start the program remotely, do you think? Or will there be, more accommodating deferral policies for people who are in this situation who can't get out? Or can you ensure that when they come here, they can get a vaccination before they hit campus? I mean, what are some of the contingencies you're thinking about, Diana?
John, you hit on all kinds of questions that are popping up right now. There are questions around the vaccination. So, AstraZeneca is approved in my country, but not your country. What do I need to be able to enter the country? And there's different considerations for entering the country versus coming on select campuses, right? Some campuses are requiring a vaccine, others are not. So I think there's the vaccination question. There's certainly when will the visa agency open, right? And for me to be able to get my I-20 to come into the US question. For schools themselves, as we think about capacity on campus, and while, schools are moving, especially the full-time programs, towards, fully residential expectation of students coming to campus if they're able to, there's still, distance guidelines that the business schools themselves don't have full control over, right? The University of Michigan has guidelines that Michigan Ross has to adhere to, and we have to think about. So, in
state guidelines and county guidelines and CDC guidelines and.
That's right. That's right. So there's I can't leave my country and I need to access education, but there's also, I might be in Ann Arbor and, what might that look like? Now, we do feel good about being able to accommodate, frankly, most of the people who plan to come to campus this fall, but that is fluid. It keeps changing in terms of what that looks like. So we're doing our best to make those plans. To your question about international students, absolutely, we're going to do everything we can to recognize some of the unique challenges that they face and what we need to do to help onboard them and engage them in the experience, in particular, if they're going to maybe need to start the experience remotely.
Right. Eric, are you thinking of any sort of accommodations, particularly for candidates that have already been admitted from India?
So it's a great question, John, and one that we've been thinking about an awful lot at Berkeley Haas, specifically because we had a very personalized deferral policy this past year. And so we do have a number of candidates who are from the India region, who, in our hearts, go out to them in this incredibly challenging time, who have already deferred 1 year. And what does that look like in their journey to defer yet another year? And so part of what we're doing is engaging folks individually. And so that means that there are different solutions to this issue depending on the individual. For some folks, it is an understanding that perhaps this is just not going to be the time for them to pursue business school, and we'll support them in an application in a future year. For others, it is navigating the sort of nuances of, that, as Diana mentioned, sort of what Berkeley Haas can do, what UC Berkeley can do, and on and on up the regulatory chain, in terms of granting a second deferral or extending that period in time for an additional year. And yet for others, still, what we're hoping to do is to give them a small window of opportunity in which they can participate remotely until such time as they can come to campus. So for us this year, we have made a commitment to be in person That commitment is something that we hope that we can honor. Again, this is all based on regulatory and
Sure.
vaccinations and all the rest. Some of this is not in our power, but it is our intention to be fully in person in the fall, and our faculty are prepared to teach in such a fashion, fully in person. But we learned a lot.
Requiring a vaccination to come on campus?
We have a policy under review that will require a vaccination. We're waiting for that. I think what we're currently waiting for is an FDA approval on those vaccinations for our policy to kick in and then be vetted, because there is a vetting procedure before we put that policy in play. But that is the thing that we are exploring, yes.
Right.
And so we will have this remote component that will sort of make it available to students much more narrow than the remote hybrid model that we had in the prior year, for folks who maybe come to the region but need to vaccinate before they can come to campus, for people who are going to come to the region but can't arrive until 1 to 2 weeks after the start of the semester. So that's our sort of off valve for folks if that's something that they're looking to pursue.
Right. And I noticed that, one university after another is now announcing that to come on campus, you're going to need to be vaccinated in the fall. Harvard made that announcement in the past week, and a lot of other schools are doing this. I think that can probably be an expectation that many internationals should have. The other expectation for those of you out there, you should know that there are many people who are actually coming to the United States for a vaccination, and they're able to get one. So even if you had to quarantine and take a COVID test before you get on a flight, you can be pretty confident that if you get here early enough and you quarantine and you get your vaccination, which you will, that you could start the program. You're just going to have to get here a little bit earlier than you might ordinarily, as long as you can get your visa, because there are a lot of logistical issues here for people, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you think differentiates your MBA experience from others. Now, Naz, one of the, I think, hallmarks of your school is the fact that you have 3 different programs catering to 3 different kinds of candidates. I think that's a clear differentiator. Maybe we should start there, and then if you'd like to expand on how you think you're different, unusual, or unique, go for it.
Great, thank you, John. And let me just quickly add to also the question about, how UF is preparing for a fall return. So we are going to be back in person, which is actually an interesting segue because our students are 1-year accelerated program students. They're starting kind of in even this summer in small class sizes. But I think that we, similar to Haas, we were planning on being fully back in person in the fall. And if anybody would like to get vaccinated in the swamp, you're welcome to do so. So
plenty of vaccines in Florida.
Yes. Come, to our football stadium where we're administering vaccines on a daily basis. But
go to Ohio, get a vaccine. You get entered into $1 million lottery for free.
Well, but I think, also kind of thinking about the culture here at UF MBA, I think that, our biggest differentiator, and I know I said this a little bit earlier on, is that we pride ourselves on bringing in a very small group of individuals. And so bringing in about 50, give or take, full-time MBAs a year gives us the opportunity to have a very hands-on approach with our students. And that hands-on approach is, from the perspective of in the classroom experience with the faculty to student ratio, of course, with our business career services, you're going to be in very close contact with our career coaches. And you're going to get that very individualized kind of approach when it comes to, what it is that you want to do and why you're looking to pursue an MBA. And then I think also we have the benefit of having the large alumni base, right? So even though we bring in only about 50 or so full-time MBA students every year, this past year we brought in over 600 professional MBAs. So that is an immediate increased network of your individuals that you'll share a classroom with, a Monday through Friday experience with, but then you also have the larger professional MBA population. And then of course, the larger Gator Nation of over, 500,000 Gators globally. So I think it's this really unique approach of having a very small class size coupled with a large network that I think really makes us unique.
Great. Eric, I know obviously location plays a key role in the school's differentiation in the Bay Area. So does the values that the school has expressed that are a reflection of its culture. Um, what else? And feel free to expound on those, because I didn't want to steal your thunder and take them away from you.
No, John, I appreciate the tee up, because ultimately when we talk about the location, what we're actually talking about isn't just the temperate weather and the fact that you're so close to nature and connected to all that's around you in terms of ideas around sustainability, ideas around energy. We're also talking about one of the more obvious pieces, which is that we are at the hub of innovation. And that plays through in so much of what we talk about on our campus. As Naz mentioned, this idea of small group, big group, I'm going to echo that, because we really truly have that as well. We have a 300 person roughly each year incoming cohort, which is very small by comparison to our peer set. But when you look at that in the larger scheme of things, you notice that we are housed in a top tier public university where almost all of the graduate programs, like 96% of the graduate programs at the University of California, Berkeley, are in the top 10 in their individual representations. And so what you see is this incredible mix of having folks from a top tier engineering school, a top tier law school, a top tier public policies institute coming through and engaging with our student body. And one of the ways that we're codifying that is we're actually building out an entrepreneurial hub. We're about 2.5 years away from actually having a physical representation of that space, so that folks who are interested in that entrepreneurial pathway, typically about 12 to 15% of our graduates going into the startup space, will have a space, will have a physical space where they can interact with the rest of these folks who have the same interest, the same inclination, and really just continue to build and grow businesses while they're here on campus. And so we love that that is often what people think about when they think about us, and would love to just sort of marry that with that other component, which is the fact that we are such a strong program in so many other spaces. We send our students to consulting at a huge volume. We send our students into banking in a huge volume. In fact, a stat that I pulled not too long ago shows that our students are getting into those investment banking internships here on the West Coast at a higher rate than almost any other school. So we have these other frameworks as well. And what I love, again, just kind of circle back and maybe close out here, what does that small group give you? It gives you this incredible opportunity to be the investment banking focused individual standing next to the entrepreneurial individual, 2 steps away from the sustainability minded individual, and really have that interwoven experience, so that you are the investment banking person, but maybe you're into impact investing, and maybe you're an energy person, but you've got that sustainability focus, or you're an entrepreneur by heart, but you're thinking about clean tech to market or social impact entrepreneurial efforts. So it's that interwoven community that I think really is our differentiator.
Great. And Diana, as Eric was speaking about the highly ranked other schools and departments at Berkeley, I'm also thinking that is definitely true of Michigan, and long a hallmark of the program as well. It's been experiential learning, where Ross has been a pioneer.
Absolutely. I think if you learn best by doing, this is a great place to be. We are going to offer as many as we can, and more than most other schools, opportunities for you to practice the skills you're learning while you're at school. The most known among that is our MAP program. So the last 7 weeks of your first year, rather than being in the classroom, you're going to be on a consulting-like engagement with 80 plus different companies and organizations across the globe. So you're really going to get a chance to deep dive into a company, into an organization. And at 7 weeks, MAP, which is the precursor to your internship, which tends to be 10 to 12 weeks, MAP tends to serve as almost a second internship. And as a result, over 90% of our students identify as career switchers. So either function or industry or both. So hands-on learning is going to give you a chance to try and to practice those skills while you're in school. We're actually hoping you try, maybe fail, right? We think you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes, and really push yourself while you're here. But in order to allow for that, for you to step outside your comfort zone and be willing to take on those risks, We need to surround that with a really supportive and engaging community that's going to push you to be your best self and push you to take on challenges that are going to stretch you. And so that's some of the experiences that we love to have. We've got more student-led venture capital funds than any other school. We have got our impact studio where you're coming together with business and social work and policy students to create social enterprises. A lot of opportunities to really practice the skills you're learning while you're here at Michigan Ross.
I want to reinforce MAP for you, only because, all schools today talk about experiential learning, but there are precious few of them that actually disrupt the traditional academic calendar and say, okay, you're going to have no courses, nothing except your experiential learning assignment that you're going to be on for 7 weeks, and you're going to do it full time. In fact, there may be some schools that have a week or 2 weeks or something like that, but as far as I know, and I know a little bit about business schools, I don't believe there's another school in the world, other than one that I'm thinking of, that actually totally interrupts the academic calendar to give this experience. And give me a sense of some of the companies that give your students experiences in MAP.
Yeah, John. I mean, some of the most popular could be some of the big tech firms, whether it's Google, Amazon, Microsoft, but we saw a lot of healthcare organizations. We see a lot of impact-focused organizations. My MAP project, I have my MBA from Michigan Ross, was in India, and we were taking a look at the vocational training system in India, trying to figure out how the public and private sectors could come together to strengthen that system so that multinational corporations would want to locate their businesses there. And in doing so, engaged with the public sector, with the private sector, with McKinsey, with the World Bank, to think about how they could structure this system to be more efficient and effective so that businesses would want to locate there. So, I mean, for me, that was an incredible opportunity to work in a country that, I'd never been to at that time, to work in at the intersection of the public and private sectors, which was a strong interest of mine. So one of the other cool things about MAP is you get to rank the projects that you're most interested in, and they run an algorithm that targets student preference. Most students get within their top 5. And there's like 100 projects to choose from. I would say easily on any given year, there's 10 to 20 that most students would die to have. So to be able to have that choice and to have such great companies in selection is really a great experience for our students.
When I think about this generation of MBA students and applicants, I think that they're different in a couple of ways. One is the new focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which this generation takes very seriously. And the second is kind of related to that, and maybe even preceded it, because diversity, equity, inclusion has really caught on and gotten momentum through all of the really tragic news in America in the last couple of years. But the other issue is, combining purpose and passion. People don't just want a job anymore. They want a job that's meaningful and that contributes in one way or another to the greater good of society. Are you seeing this trend in your applicants and students, and how is your school reacting to it? Eric?
Sure. So great question for us, because I think we actually seek that out in some ways. And so again, you mentioned earlier that one of the things that we have as a sort of unique component to us is our 4 defining leadership principles. These leadership principles focus on your ability to understand the world around you, to think about how you interact with one another, and in some ways to be equity minded in the way that you go out into the world as a leader. And so we've had this alignment for a while. Our defining leadership principles just hit their sort of 10-year anniversary this past year. But one of the things that we've seen is that so many of our students who are coming through, and some of the applicants coming through, have seen these as signposts, as an institution that actually waved a flag and said, this is who we are, this is what we stand for. And there's been a self-selection process, we believe, but it's possible that that actually extends to this entire generation of MBA candidates, MBA applicants at least. So what have we seen? We've seen folks who have come in with applications that are focused on careers in equity fluent leadership, a career track that perhaps didn't even exist 5-10 years ago. Folks who have come through hoping to take advantage of our areas of emphasis in that space, so that they can refine that skill set and take it with them into the marketplace as leaders in DEI throughout the business world, or simply as leaders who have a sense of equity and focus. And so it's appeared in their applications. It's appeared through the number of people who have demonstrated particular interest in those academic areas that we have here on campus. And it's also shown through the folks who are applying through various application pipelines and funnels. One that I think is very obvious for this space is the Consortium for Graduate Management. And we've got a number of students, an increasing number of students applying through that pathway with that particular focus and that framework in mind. Right.
Naz, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, no, thank you. And you know, in fact, we are super excited to be one of the newest schools to be a part of the Ramba Fellowship Program. And so that's actually something that, you know, when we talk about, idea or diversity, equity, and inclusion and ability, I think that it's important to kind of continue to foster those relationships with not only what we're doing on campus, but then that kind of outwardly, kind of is cast out to our prospective students. And so it's fun because even more recently, I've received a number of messages from individuals that have seen our logo pop up on the Ramba website and are reaching out that way. And so we have so much involvement across our various kind of affinity groups here on campus. And a lot of what we've allowed our students to do, our MBA organizations to do, is work with our professional development team to create various professional development opportunities, speaker series, workshops in this space. And I think it's so important that not only we kind of take this grassroots approach with our students to figure out what their needs are, but then also working collectively with future employers and these various other kind of outwardly facing organizations to kind of figure out what best practices are and where the movement is happening, so that we can constantly adjust as needed. And so it's something that we are putting a lot of time and energy into, because we think it's a super important space to be in. And it's, ultimately the arena of workforce is moving in that direction. So we need to make sure that we can equip our students beyond the critical thinking skill set and the prehistoric, if you will, notion of what an MBA program had to offer is what can we also equip our students with, so that when they're going out to the real world, they're ready, prepared, and they can also be involved within their respective communities. Because of course, you come to any one of our institutions for a small period of time. We hope you make an impact here in Gainesville, Florida, but then we hope you learn the skill set to make a positive impact for any community you engage with in the future.
Absolutely. And Diana, I know that Ross was the first prominent school to actually have a social impact fund. And many other schools have actually come to Ross to study how it's deployed and how you use students to make these investments and then launch similar programs on their campus. So that's a really good example of combining passion and purpose. What's your take on the whole move toward greater diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Absolutely, John. And I think we're seeing so many people very, very values driven and coming to the MBA experience, recognizing that business is such an impactful and powerful force to create change, right? Thinking about the amount of capital and then how do you leverage that to direct it towards making change. And so, when you're looking at schools, I think a couple things to take a look at to try to understand the culture of the community of a school. To give some context, our last 9 student body presidents have come from the consortium. The last 3 have been Black women. Of our section leaders, so we have 10, right? 5 section leaders for MBA 2s, 5 for MBA 1s, 9 of 10 are women, and 6 of 10 are students of color. You take a look at who's running the consulting club, the finance club, major clubs and organizations. It's not just the representation that you see on the class profile. I think it's the engagement that you see and the inclusion that you see at the school. Allyship training is something that our students engage with. Inclusion chairs are throughout. So, the tech club might have an inclusion chair to make sure that different perspectives are being taken into account, and also that the tech club chooses to partner with other clubs to kind of cross-share ideas and to think about things and how tech, let's say, impacts different communities. So there are a lot of discussions regularly, and it's really exciting to see just how much momentum there is and what our students are capable of going on to do. And As Eric mentioned, we're hoping people seek that out and then seek Michigan Ross to be a platform as a foundation for their career going forward as change makers.
Great. Now, a lot of people consider MBA admissions something of a black box. Now, we don't think it's a black box. We know when you say you evaluate candidates holistically, you're taking into account a lot of different factors. And for any given candidate, the emphasis on any one of those factors will change. Nonetheless, there is this persistent belief that you weigh some metrics more than others. There's a general belief that standardized tests have long gotten the most weight in admissions decisions, or undergraduate transcripts, or where you work and whether you've advanced in your job, or even where you went to school and got your undergraduate degree, because those are filters in essence that if you passed through, one would think, you've met some sort of criteria that was selective. What's your take? Did you actually assign any value on any one of the many metrics that you use to evaluate a candidate for admission? Eric?
So the short answer is no. the more expanded answer is this. At least for us, what we're looking for is a series of competencies, and those competencies can appear throughout the application. What is our charge here in the admissions office? Our charge is to ensure that the candidates that come through have given indication in their application that they will do well in the program. They will add value to the program, and they will gain value from the program. And so we look at these through these competencies, as you mentioned, in various parts of the application. If one of the competencies that we need to be sure exists is a understanding of quantitative material, we're going to look for it, perhaps in a test, perhaps in an undergraduate transcript, perhaps in a professional work environment. Maybe your recommenders are the ones to tell us all about your strength in a particular area. And that's that sort of that holistic review. And then holistic is such a charged word in our field, but ultimately is the ability for us to look for these competencies throughout the application. And I imagine for schools that are removing a component of the application, they're looking for those competencies in the other parts of the application.
And I see Diana and Naz nodding their head in agreement. So I assume that your answer applies to both Florida and Michigan, right?
Yeah, I can take that one first, John. So, it's interesting because I think that Eric, really hit on that. It was a great point, right? Like at the end of the day, there are a number of competencies that we're looking for, and ultimately it kind of boils down to that culture fit, I think, also with the program, and kind of, a lot of the times it's managing expectations. What are your post-MBA goals? What do you have up to, applying to the MBA? How well can you, tell your story? How coachable are you? What are some certain components that we think give us, confidence that you will be, a fantastic Gator while you're in the program, but then a great brand ambassador and fellow Gator for years to come. And just to add to that also, I know that you kind of had alluded to earlier that we have 3 different types of programs. And I think that when you talk about admissions, if I have somebody who's looking at let's say our 1-year all majors program, this is really designed for somebody who, has a clear understanding what they want to do post MBA, and they're going to do that in 12 months, right? And so we need to set them up for success in that 12-month period. So what they're bringing to on the admission side in terms of their quantitative abilities, their professional experience, their ability to kind of tell their story, all that's really important because they have such a short period of time to come and absorb the content of their MBA program before they're coming back to the real world, right? And then, for our 1-year business majors program, those who already have a business degree within the last 7 years, they even have a shorter period. They have a 10-month program. So it's very important that we're aligning kind of those objectives accordingly to set those students up for success. And of course, our 2-year full-time students, they have that summer internship. So the questions that we ask, and in fact, in the admissions process, it's not only admissions team member, but our business career services team, as well as our student affairs team members, all of which are interviewing each of these candidates to make sure each one of these components components are satisfied so that we can holistically say, look, we're bringing in the best possible group of candidates.
Right. Diana, same, right?
Same. There's not one particular, aspect that has a particular, a specific weight to it. One of the things I guess I would mention, we're here right now in May. Schools are starting to, or will shortly be putting out their essays. There are things that you could be doing now that are going to help you think about this process. I think the question is typically, what are schools looking for? But I think if you start that journey with, what are some of the areas of strength that I have? How do I differentiate? What am I really energized by? Like, I would literally take out a piece of paper and think about, when I work professionally, when am I the most energized? What's happening around me? What am I doing? What am I working on a spreadsheet? Am I working by myself? Am I working with a team? What is it about that particular thing that I really enjoy doing? Those are the kinds of things that you can be doing now, even before the essays come out, to help prepare you to think about some of the attributes that you bring, some of these traits that Eric and Naz have mentioned, some of the elements that are really differentiating of you, because it's probably not surprising to you what schools are looking for, right? We want to know that you're resilient and that you are going to engage thoughtfully with your classmates and embrace diverse perspectives and opinions. And, these aren't surprising to you, right? That those are things that are important to us now. They're going to be important to future employers, right? So, for example, if you haven't learned about how you've changed or grown during the last year, start thinking about that, right? There's been so much change, and being aware of how you've personally changed and grown, and then how you want to grow with the MBA and beyond, I think is something you could be doing today, right? Before essay questions are out, before you even pick up the application, to get ready to put forward your best self.
And I would bet that all three of you read a lot of essays this past year that had references to the pandemic and how people were dealing with it, both on a personal level and a professional level at work. And to your point, Diana, about even if a school has not released its essays, you still have this period of introspection that you can undergo that will lead to better answers and better thinking about what the MBA can do for you. I sense that most schools are going to repeat the essays that they've already had, given how much uncertainty there is in the world, the fact that many people are still suffering through, in a very major way, the pandemic. So I would expect very little change in the essays for this coming year. In fact, at the MBA Summit, which is sponsored by Michigan Ross, where we had Wharton, Kellogg, and of course Ross, all three schools said there'd be no changes in their essays that were of any substance whatsoever because of that. And I assume that most schools will adopt a similar position. Let me ask a question that is always on the minds of applicants, even though to me the answer is obvious. So Diana, if my GMAT score is below the average, should I even bother to apply, because do I have a chance?
Good question. And of course, when you look at those averages, I think people get scared off. And I wish that weren't the case, because when I think, we talked a little bit earlier, I was mentioning some of the people that are leading the school in different ways, or people that contribute in unique and different ways. What I didn't tell you was, and every single one of them has a 750, right? There are people contributing in so many different ways that are leading and contributing in the classroom in different ways. Eric mentioned earlier this review of kind of how we're taking a look at how you might contribute academically, right? We're responsible to the faculty for making sure you're likely to be successful. I'm looking at your recommendation letter to see if you've had perseverance or scrappiness that might overcome some of these, some of the lower test score or lower academics, because that to me maybe means you're going to show up for office hours. That means you're not going to show up to your group meeting unprepared, right? That you are somebody who has personal accountability and is going to be able to contribute. So I think people think that this test score, like they define themselves by it. And I know it's just so agonizing for people to do that. It really is part of a bigger package for us to understand how you're likely to do in the program. That said, we have way more candidates who would be able to do the academic elements of the program than we have spots available in the class, right? So, I think thinking about not just what you're able to provide academically, but that's where we spend more of our time is on the rest of the application, whether it's your essays, whether it's your recommendation letter, whether it's your professional experience or the interview. That's where we get to know what makes you tick. And that's where you see more differentiation than the other parts of the application.
And let me remind everyone that when they read a median test score on a class profile, it means that half of all the entering students were below that score. And when they read an average, it means that plenty of people were below the average. So let's not freak out and think you have to retake the test 10 times and get the best possible score. In some cases, the retake will help you, but don't panic over it, because take everyone at their word that this is a holistic process. Now, there are a few questions piling up, and I want to remind everyone that after our session, there will be info sessions that you can enter and ask any question you want of Diana, Eric, or Naz, and they'll be held immediately after for a half hour each. But nonetheless, there are a couple of questions that have popped up that I think demand answers, if only because a good number of people are in this boat. I applied to Haas. It's my first choice school. I really want to have my MBA experience in the Bay Area, but you rejected me. If I reapply and wait, what makes a reapplicant application stand out? What has to happen to give me a better chance next time as a reapplicant? Eric?
So it's a great question, John. So the first thing to say, and this is something that's been true for us for a while now, the reapplicants to our program have a higher rate of admission than the general applicant pool. Now, why is that? It's because very few people have an opportunity to tell us part two of that journey. I hit a stumbling block. How did I overcome that stumbling block? In this case, I'm applying to business school. I did not get into the business school of my choice. I'm committed to this institution, and I want to show you my commitment to this institution. I've typically done some part of self-reflection, understood where there might be weakness in this application, and seek to shore up that weakness. And that can be in a number of different ways. MBA short courses, if you think quantitative is your weakness, it could be a progression in your professional sphere to show that you actually have this growth track that you're going on. In some cases, it's a refinement of that career goal, saying perhaps I settled on something a little too broad, and I want to narrow it down because it better fits the skills and experiences that I'm bringing to this application today. What are those commonalities across those different changes? It's that you took the time to look back on your application, reflect on where there may be challenges, and begin to build to address those challenges. What is the worst thing that you can do then in this exact framework is resubmit the exact same application with no new information. We do give you the opportunity to resubmit most of the same material, but we strongly encourage you to give us new information throughout that process. And I think that's where the key to success lies, in that reapplicant pathway.
Right. Here's another good question, and it affects a lot of people. Naz, I applied to Florida. I'm on your wait list. How do I get off?
That's a great question.
Do I just sit around and wait for you, or can I be proactive and nudge you in any way and not aggravate you?
I definitely applaud those who have grit. I think that is definitely a component of what we're looking for, in an applicant, because of course, once you're enrolled in the program, we want to make sure that you are going to show up for those office hours, that you're going to be communicative with our business career services team, that you're going to have, what it takes to be scrappy and find those post MBA opportunities. But I think, on the front end, as I have an applicant that maybe is just waitlisted, I just say, communicate with us. Don't be scared. Don't think that, we're in this, kind of, as you mentioned, this black box, right? We want to have that open line of communication with our students. And I pride my team on having a transparent process. So if there's something that a candidate we think could better their application candidacy, we'll let you know. We want to have that open dialogue with the candidate, because at the end of the day, if you think that where you want to be is here at Warrington in Florida, we want to help facilitate and foster that. So keep me posted. And if there's anything that you can do to resubmit or like what Eric was saying, if there's something that you can shed more light on. In fact, just the other day, we re-interviewed somebody to say, hey, we interviewed you back in October, but have you taken the suggestions of our career coaches? And let's now talk and see where you are at this point to figure out, what changes have you enacted to say this is a good time to start now. And so these are things that are only feasible if you're communicating with us.
Great. Diana, if I had a 690 and I'm on your wait list and I retake the test and get a 720, will it help me if I'm on the wait list to get off?
If that was the reason, maybe that we were held back a little, if there were some questions academically, but honestly, between a 690 and a 720, that probably wasn't it, right? Because those are both great scores, and that's not where it lies. I think with the wait list, one of the things I think candidates don't realize is we also don't have full control over the wait list and the wait list timing, right? So we have people in our classes right now that have committed this fall that, we lost somebody this week that got their dream job this week, right? They're not even going to a different MBA program. They're just sticking with their job. Maybe they'll apply to the MBA going forward, but that's somebody that we thought was coming in September that just this week, let's say, we learned wasn't coming. Now, I think candidates think, okay, if one person goes off, then one gets added. It also doesn't work that way, right? So we have a general sense of, from this point until September, how many people might we lose given historic tracking that we have. And kind of a rough enrollment goal around that. So we know that with that one person, we don't necessarily pick up one on top of that, but we'll see what the trends look like, over the next coming weeks. And then that's when we might go back to the wait list. When we go back to the wait list, we're looking at the kind of whole wait list. We're looking at your updates. We're looking at what you've told us through the process that we've put forward to try to understand where you're at. And then we call folks in advance of admitting them. Just because we call you doesn't mean you're going to get admitted. It's really just us, as Naz mentioned, checking in. It might be us saying, tell us where you're at, right? Have you already committed to a different program? Are you still thinking this is a good fit for you? What questions can we answer for you about the process? I wish that we could spend time talking to everybody on the wait list. I know there's a lot of questions of, can I get personal feedback sessions? Recognizing that there's thousands of you and just a few of us, that's not as possible as we wish it could be. But what we find is that most waitlist candidates have a really good awareness of what they need to improve. Like when I put the question back to a candidate, 9 times out of 10, they're like, I think it's this. It's typically that, right? Like they know, what they could be doing to improve. But we will be doing a reapplicant webinar this summer that will go into more depth and will allow candidates to be able to ask more questions, and I'm happy to talk more about the process at that point. As Eric mentioned, being a reapplicant is not a bad thing. I think people think that there's something kind of negative, some negative indicator for it. And it really just comes down to, what is your story now than what it was last? What do we need to know about you and how you've improved during that time frame? And in some cases, it might not have been you. It might have been just a really competitive applicant pool that was around you.
Right. Good point. Last question. I want to borrow a question that we had at the MBA Summit, because I love the question. And it occurred through social listening. And Eric, we'll start with you. If there's one thing you could change about MBA admissions, what would it be?
So that's a good question. I think the opportunity to meet individuals is probably the strongest way that we get to know you and you get to know us. And I think in the virtual frame, we've certainly had way more reach than we've ever had before, but there's still the one-to-many. That's still the mechanism for us, because there's so few of us and there's so many applicants out there in the world. If there was a way in which we could structure an engagement to have these one-on-one connections where we can truly explore fit and understand, is this the right program for you? Are you the best fit candidate for us? I think that'd be exceptional. I know that we get a little bit of that in our interview process, but that's really after you've submitted your application. That's for a much smaller group of humans. It's not everybody. The opportunity to do these an individualized engagement would be fantastic. It's a pie in the sky idea. I don't know that we could ever implement it. Certainly if somebody's building the mechanism for it, it might be happening here in the Bay, but as of now, it doesn't exist.
Great. Naz, do you have one thing you would change?
Actually, I think Eric hit the nail on the head. I think if I had the opportunity to connect with each individual, because I think a lot of times people just don't know what they want to do, and they don't know how an MBA can help and how our MBA at each of our respective schools can help. And so I think having that individualized approach would largely, help candidates also think about what their post-MBA goals are. So I think just having more of that individualized approach would be something I would most certainly vouch for as well.
Diana?
And I would just say, I wish that we could just have great transparency in this process. We try to do that. We try to tell the story about what we're looking at, but I think candidates start to look to all different sources, lots of different sources, and sometimes conflicting sources, right? Where it's causing more panic and anxiety than we want for it to. It shouldn't be that way. This should be a self-reflection and an exploration where you're learning a lot about yourself and getting excited about what could be ahead with the MBA. And so, I wish that we could make sure that we're getting our messages across as thoughtfully, transparently, and in the level of depth candidates want. And I know that we think we're doing that, and more, I think, is required of that. And we're going to continue to work towards that, because we want you to make a good decision for you so that you can find the best school for you to thrive.
I think that's a great place to end at. So, hey, it was such fun to be with all three of you. I wish we could be together in person and all go out for drinks right now. But hey, the virtual world is a virtual world, and we can pretend to have a drink and celebrate celebrate our little 1 hour together. And so thank you, Diana. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Naz. It's a pleasure to see all three of you again. And for all of you out there, I want to remind you that we now have info sessions. So you have for half an hour, you can go and ask Diana any kind of question you want, Naz or Eric. Just go to our landing page and click, and you can do that. There are a few other questions that were left here that I couldn't get to. And incidentally, I should remind everyone that I'll be back at 11:30 with our careers panel. And we'll basically come to a conclusion on CentreCourt this time. So thanks again. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching.